Thursday Night Tailgate, where the spotlight is always on the positive. Tune in Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time to hear your favorite NFL legends, players, and coaches sharing their stories. Now back to Chris and Bob.
I wouldn't joke about anything else that happens here tonight.
Now back with us on Thursday Night Tailgate is Cowboys Hall of Fame defensive tackle Bob Lilly. Let me remind you about Bob's background. He's from Throckmorton, Texas, which is northwest of Dallas, in between Dallas and Lubbock. His family moved to Pendleton, Oregon, his senior year of high school. That year, he was named All-State in both football and basketball. He came back to Texas to play his college ball at TCU, where he led the Horned Frogs to the 1958 and 59 Southwest Conference Championships. He was named All-Southwest Conference twice and a Consensus All-American in 1960. In 2006, he was inducted into the East-West Shrine Game Hall of Fame. In 1980, he was not only inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, but the Pro Football Hall of Fame as well. He was the Cowboys' first ever draft pick in 1961. He was a part of their Super Bowl VI championship team in 1971. He was an 11-time Pro Bowler. He was named to the NFL's 75th anniversary team and to the All-Decade teams for the 1960s and 1970s. He was the first inductee into the Cowboys Ring of Honor at Cowboys Stadium, and in 1999, the Sporting News ranked him number 10 on their list of the 100 greatest football players of all time. And we are honored to have him back with us again tonight here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Good evening, Bob. Chris and Bob here. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Welcome back, Bob.
Thank you very much, Chris and Bob. It's good to be here. Still here.
So, Bob, I'm curious. Growing up, did you have an NFL team that you rooted for because, the Cowboys, nor the Dallas Texans, or even the Houston Oilers had come into existence yet when you were a kid in Texas? Was there a favorite NFL team for you, or was it sort of all college football all the time?
Well, we didn't have a TV set until 56 because they didn't have TV in Throckmorton. And we got our first television, and we had a antenna that was about 30 or 40 foot tall, and you had to rotate it by hand. We could either get one station in Abilene or one in Wichita Falls. So I got to watch the New York Giant, Baltimore Colt game, and I think it was, that was 59. I got to watch some football, pro football in 56, and then we moved to Oregon in 57, that summer of 56, and I went my senior year to Pendleton, and we didn't have a TV there. So I did go with the coaches and watch the Cotton Bowl. I think the Cotton Bowl that year was Syracuse and TCU. And Jim Brown he was a senior that year. He scored 27 points. He kicked all the extra points, scored all the touchdowns, and we beat them. I think they missed one extra point because the center snapped the ball over the center's head, and TCU won the game. So it was, anyway, I was already committed to go there, and that's the only team I'd ever gone to watch a game in my life. And my dad, who was crippled when he was a young man, had a friend at the gate at TCU. They weren't ever at full back then. And so anyway, they let me in. They let me to come with him. I started going down there when I was probably 9 years old to watch TCU. And so I got a lot of scholarship offers up in California, Oregon, and all that Washington area. But it seemed to me like it was a long ways from home. So anyway, I came back and had a wonderful time and wonderful career and wonderful teammates at TCU.
And Bob, as I was looking through a lot of the stories around your career, in '63, you guys had to play a game against the Cleveland Browns 2 days after President Kennedy was assassinated. And I read that Browns fans sort of took their anger and sadness, about the situation. They took it out on you guys because you were from Dallas, where obviously President Kennedy was shot. What was that whole experience like for you guys?
Well, we were in practice on Friday, and Jack Eskridge was our equipment manager, and he came out and told Coach Landry that the president had been shot, but was in Parkland Hospital. And so he relayed that message to us, and it kind of really doused cold water on our practice, but we were praying and hoping that he would survive, and not knowing that he was probably already gone. He came back later and said that he had not made it. And that really was like, we do not want to play this weekend. This is terrible. This is terrible for Dallas. It's terrible for the Cowboys. It's terrible for each of us. A fine young president like that, it was just sad. It was very, very sad at that time in my life. I couldn't conceive of it. But it happened, and we were not liked at all by anybody for the next 2 or 3 years. But especially that Sunday, we went to Cleveland. We went on to Cleveland. I think we went on Friday, or we might have gone that afternoon, or we might have waited till Saturday. I can't remember. But I know that nobody would help us with our equipment or anything. And I don't blame them. I really understand. I mean, at the hotel, it was I'd played up there a couple of times already because they were in our conference at that time. And the fans were not very friendly, and occasionally somebody threw a Coke bottle or something at us. And so we wore our helmets and our parkas, and we did that for the next year and a half, 2 years. So those times were not very enjoyable, but all that time Coach Landry was a great coach, and we were getting better and better. And, finally in 65, we went to the playoff game. We called it the Losers Bowl. That was in Florida. And the Baltimore Colts beat us in that game. But then the next year we played Green Bay to go to the first Super Bowl. And the next year was the Ice Bowl. And by then, I mean, we had Bob Hayes had come, and we had, the people we had overcome the obstacles, the trauma, and the stigma of the president being shot here, because he was obviously murdered by someone outside of Dallas. So I mean, it was just a process of having to get toughened up mentally and having to get better as a team, because everybody we played was trying to kill us. And so, we finally got pretty tough, the ones that lasted, and went on and ultimately, went to 67, went to Ice Bowl, as I said, and then we finally got to the Super Bowl in 70 and lost it to Baltimore, and then won it in 71. But we had a good football team for a number of years. We were in the playoffs for a long time. Coach Landry had 18 or 19 years in a row of being in the playoffs. I think it was 18 out of 19 or 19 out of 20.
And Bob, we've been blessed to have one of your teammates, Dan Reeves, on the show with us several times. What do you remember about playing alongside Dan?
Well, he was a great guy, and he came. He had a deep Southern drawl. Came to the Cowboys. He was a quarterback, I think, in college, and so Coach Landry saw him as a halfback. He could pass, he could run, and he was a pretty good runner, a good passer, really, and a good blocker, and very sturdy. And ultimately, he became a player coach, and then ultimately became the head coach of the Broncos and the Falcons. And Dan was a great guy. And it was fun, because I think Dan actually, during my career, scored more touchdowns in one game than anybody in Cowboy history. Now, that history only lasted till 74. But anyway, Dan had that record, and it's pretty nifty because he scored touchdowns receiving and passing and running. And I think all the ones that they gave him credit for in that game were for either running or catching, receiving. So anyway, great guy. He learned. He was very, very bright. He learned the game, and he was a really, really nice person. We really thought a lot of him.
Bob, questions for Bob?
It's great to speak with you again, Bob. We're so familiar with Dallas and the personnel moves and et cetera these days being handled by Jerry Jones. But back when you came in the league, Bob, it was Clint Murchison and Ted Schramm, another guy who would go on to the Hall of Fame. Talk about your early memories about those two and your dealings with them when you came in the league in '61.
Well, really, when I was drafted by the Texans, number 2. E.J. Holla was drafted number 1, and by the Cowboys, number 1, and E.J. was number 2. And I talked to my coach, Coach Martin. Abe Martin was at TCU. And I went to ask him. I don't know what to do. Everybody was trying to sign you to a contract. Before the Cowboys drafted, they drafted late, and so they drafted after the AFL, and so I was already drafted by the Texans, and I didn't know what to do, and the money wasn't very big. You could almost go into coaching and do as well. And so I thought, well, I'll go ask my coach here at TCU, and I talked to Coach Martin. And he said, well, Robert, he said, both families are wonderful families. And he said, you just have to think about, if you want to stay in this area, you're probably better off staying with the NFL. He said, we've had 2 or 3 other teams that have come and tried to make it, and they didn't. And he said, in fact, one of them was the NFL, but he said, that's my only advice to you. If you get drafted by the Cowboys, well, that's what I would do if the money's relatively the same, which it was. So that's why I went with the Cowboys, basically. Hadn't really, most of my college opponents and some of my teammates at TCU went to the Dallas Texans. And for about 2 or 3 years, I kind of wished I had them, because they were filling up. They were at least putting 30, 40,000 in the Cotton Bowl, or 50, and we were putting like 20. And on a cloudy day, rainy day, they were all under the stands, and we couldn't even see the crowd. But it was like the damper was kind of put on with the assassination of President Kennedy, and the Chiefs, Lamar Hunt was a wonderful man, and I got to know him, and I got to know Mr. Murkison and Clint, I'll call him, because that's what he wanted me to call him. And they were both really nice people. You couldn't ask for better owners. But, times were tough back then. The Cowboys didn't make a lot of money, and probably the Texans didn't either. I think I read one time they made $1 million or something the first year, or maybe they only lost $1 million. I can't remember which. And I remember that Mr. Hunt said, well, Lamar he can last 10 more years at this rate, or something like that. It was a whole different world back then. And they ultimately did work out a merger and went to Kansas City. And I'm sure that was a nice, lovely place. I had a lot of my friends in the Southwest Conference went up there, and they all came back to Texas, as far as I know, but they really liked playing up there because it was cooler. So anyway, I think I made the right choice for me, and that was, I got to play 14 years with the Cowboys, and we did win a Super Bowl. We could have easily won a few more, but we didn't quite get there. And there were just a lot of obstacles, but there was a lot of opportunity. And Dallas was a growing city, and everybody had an opportunity here. It was wonderful, and people I knew, people from Fort Worth and West Texas and Dallas, and it was just a great experience for me to play. And Coach Landry was a fabulous coach and a man. And my teammates, I will never forget them. They're just absolutely the best. So I think, looking back at it at this point in life, I made a good decision based on asking other people what they would do. And, it turned out good. It really did.
And Bob, you played both defensive end and tackle. It seems after a couple of years in the league, it was solely defensive tackle for you. How did that come about? Were you in favor of it? Obviously, it resulted in a Hall of Fame career. And what did you prefer?
I preferred defensive tackle, and I never wanted to move to defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
But Coach Landry, see, I'm ambidextrous, but I'm left-handed basically. As far as he thought I could be a great left defensive end, but I am, I got to be in the middle of the play. I mean, I just really enjoy getting tangled up with all those players and playing defensive end. About half the time you're out there waiting on something to happen.
Right.
If it's not a passing down and they're running the other way, you got to contain, because otherwise, as I learned, they will run reverses. Quarterback will fake and run your way, and you're going the other way. And so it was a lonely place for me. But my second year, I did go to Pro Bowl as a defensive end. My third year, I moved to defensive tackle, and I actually had a pretty good year, but I didn't go to Pro Bowl. But then I went 10 times after that. So, it worked. Defensive tackle was my natural position, and I really enjoyed it. It's a very fast, hard game in the middle. But what you learn some little nuances of the game, like when a guy puts his fingers down and they're red, his fingernails, that means he's going to try to kill you. You learn if they back off the ball a little bit, it's good.
Did we lose Bob? Bob, are you still with us?
So, yeah, I think we lost him, Chris.
Yeah, it looks like we did. Hopefully, we can get him to call back in here in a minute. It's so unfortunate. I love the nuance piece. The with the fingernails, right? You see the red. They're pressing down hard. They're coming for you. I guess we lost him. Hopefully, we can catch up again with Bob real soon, because I was looking forward to hearing some of the other nuances to the game, Bob, that he learned as a player down in the trenches. And one of the things one last question I was hoping to get from us, which is what you mentioned at the top of the show, right? 14 years in the league, never missed a game, right? And it's sort of, I was curious to see, was he just that lucky? Because we had, our good friend Ed White, right, played all those years at guard for Minnesota and San Diego. Hardly ever missed any playing time at all. Are you really that lucky that, injury never befell you? Or when you look around, do you say, what, because of the time that if you were injured, it didn't matter, right? You play through it. You suck it up, you play through it. Tape an aspirin to it. We talk about that all the time. Tape an aspirin to it and go back out there and play. So I was hoping to get Bob's take on that, but hopefully we get the honor of having him back on the show again, Bob, at some point here real soon.
Yeah, and that I think we brought that up with him last time, and it was that basically he told us, Chris, it's a combination of being lucky health-wise where you didn't have to lay in a hospital bed, but they did play in pain, and he told us he played with broken bones, etc. It was a different era. And you get goosebumps listening to him, Chris, because, he's got so many stories, and a guy that good, one of the greats of all time on the defensive side. We're honored to speak with him.